The Battle of Britain was a major air campaign that was fought largely over southern England in the summer and the autumn of 1940. Germany had plans after the evacuation of the British forces from Dunkirk and the fall of France. Germany had even bigger plans. Their plans were to gain air superiority in preparation for an all-out invasion of Great Britain. The Battle of Britain was the British forces, mainly the British Air Forces, fighting to save their country from annihilation and from complete takeover by German forces. It's one of the most famous and probably the most integral in terms of the implications of losing that battle, one of the most integral battles in military history of Britain. And it is the 85th anniversary this year of the Battle of Britain. And I caught up a couple of days back to talk over the implications more fully with Bill Hills and Gary Graham. Gary Graham is the president of the local RAF here in Toowoomba, and Bill Hills is a long-time member. And the pair join me now to tell us a little bit more. Bill and Gary, good morning and welcome.
Thanks, David.
Thank you, David.
Now, two significant battles that are being commemorated in Australia at pretty much the same time, and that is the Battle of Britain and effectively the Battle of Australia. But we want to go back firstly and reflect on the significance of the Battle of Britain. And tell me why, perhaps Gary, if I start with you, why we mark the Battle of Britain. What was the relevance to Australia?
Well, it was a call to arms, David, from Allied forces throughout the Commonwealth. If Britain had fallen, then who knows what may have happened. And so at the start of the war, there was not a lot of trained pilots, and the call went out internationally to have as many pilots that could act as fighter pilots to defend Britain. And the Battle of Britain did have a number of Australians involved, some who unfortunately lost their lives, and hence the reason why we take the time to commemorate their service.
So did they have Australian pilots because we were allied with them and that was an agreement, or did they have Australian pilots because they had moved to England or enlisted in their Air Force for whatever reason?
There was various ways and means that these pilots got to England. We were called upon to supply aircrew, and as we were speaking earlier off air, there was a lot we know about Bomber Command, but this was prior to that campaign. And when Hitler decided to issue the Directive Number 16 and Operation Sea Lion, to invade Britain and take over. And the idea was to nullify the forces of the then British Air Force in as much as fighter command. So if there was no fighters in the air, then it was open slather for the German bombers to take aim at any place that they would like to. So in defence, we needed fighter aircraft and fighter pilots.
Okay. The battle itself went for a considerable amount of time, so really from early July through to the end of October of 1940. There's a lot that happened in the timeline of Battle of Britain, and we can't go through it all. But having said that, we want to give people a picture of how it unfolded. Can I just go through some key moments and get you to just explain their significance? So it started effectively on the 10th of July. As you say, Germany decided that it wanted to essentially wipe out Britain's Air Force defence and be able to bomb at will. 13th of August, a day they call Eagle Day. What was the relevance of Eagle Day?
Yes, these days became known in history And Eagle Day was the day where the Luftwaffe launched intense raids on Royal Air Force airfields, focusing their attacks on the southeast of England, which was the closest, of course, to France, where the Germans were entrenched and had all their airfields. So Eagle Day marks that day with those intense raids. Then only 5 days later, on the 18th of August, what they called the hardest day, fierce air battles between the Luftwaffe and the RAF, with severe loss of RAF aircraft on the ground. Following that, intense fighting over the interim period, but on the 7th of September is what they call the Blitz, and that was where mass bombing raids were launched against London and continued against major British cities.
And just on that, did this bombing take place while the British planes were also battling with while the German planes were also battling with the British planes, or had they effectively decimated the Brits' Air Force at the time?
Well, the numbers were certainly stacked against the Royal Air Force because of the loss of aircraft on the ground, and the job of the Royal Air Force was to engage the fighter escorts of the bombers. The German Luftwaffe were sent over, and because they were only just over the channel, they were able to launch fighters who have a limited range with bombers who have a longer range to protect those bombers until they got to their targets. It was seen by the Germans that if they could take care of the fighter command, then there would be no opposition to the bombers bombing wherever they wanted to. And so with limited resources, and we've all seen movies on the subject, the famous Battle of Britain movie, where not only were the pilots but the ground staff were also overtasked with trying to get a number of aircraft in the air to defend Britain from this onslaught.
The British Prime Minister at the time, Winston Churchill, acknowledged that Britain was effectively fighting for its very existence, and made his famous speech of gratitude to the British and Allied aircrew. What did he say again?
Well, I will defer to Bill here, because Bill's very good at being able to impersonate.
I haven't got my cigar. Never before in the field of human conflict has so much been owed by so many to so few. And then there was another Churchillian, which came up a bit later in this action period, when he said, if the British Empire, which will last for 1,000 years, men will say, this was our finest hour. And it's become famous on that, and there's humour attached to that, but it was, as Gary was saying, a very, very tense period, and really Britain was on its knees at that stage, and all this fighter activity, with the life of a fighter pilot during the Battle of Britain was a maximum of 4 weeks, from the day of training until the day he was shot down or whatever, or he died of injuries and wounds after. So, that's a tremendous weight to carry, isn't it?
Absolutely. And the bravery going into battle, knowing those stats.
Yes.
Before we move on to the Battle of Australia, it was such a seminal point in Britain's, I guess, lifespan as a nation, wasn't it? Because, you can't think of a time with any Allied forces where they've been under such sustained attack, the enemy's so geographically close, and you've got these pictures. You go over to London, and you'll see pictures of them using the tube stations as bomb shelters and camping down there of an evening, and every night they knew an attack was going to come in some form, but they didn't know how bad, where it was was going to hit, who was going to be affected, and then the royal family would come out, and that's how they got their reputation. The Queen Mother of being a mother of the people, would be out there amongst the wounded, sort of helping, personally rather than just watching from afar. So there's so many things about this period of time that really made Britain the nation that it is today. Is that a fair point? Or?
Very, very much so, David. The involvement, we've heard of stories of Queen Elizabeth when she was Princess Elizabeth, stealing out of home and then going down to see what assistance she could give to get out there, and of course it was the making of Britain, as Bill's said, their finest hour, to repel such an onslaught over a long period of time, nearly 4 months all up, and then to come out where the Luftwaffe and the German command decided that their loss rate was way too high.
Yep.
They could not maintain such a loss rate, but also the losses on the Allied forces side. It was a moment in history that needs to be recognised, and for those that participated and fought and maybe lost their lives, we need to remember that.